Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey guys, welcome to Voice of Gord. So this podcast you're about to hear is my interview with James Year, a photojournalism grad student at the University of Syracuse. James and I discussed his work documenting the last days of the big game hunter, as it were. He's taking photographs and interviewing people whose jobs are at threat of being automated away. Number one on the list is truck drivers. I met up with James at a small truck show here in upstate New York back in September. A few news items have come out since then with regards to automated cars and issues with those, and different automated truck companies laying people off, and some different changes to the vibe with that subject, and I'll include links to those articles in the show notes. This is my very first interview ever talking to anyone, so forgive me the way it sounds. Hopefully, as this show progresses, I will become a better interviewer, and things will sound better, and you'll enjoy it that much more. But anyway, on to the show. Here's my interview with Mr. James Year. Right. G'day, everyone. We are live in Norwich, New York at the Uncle Bear Tom Safford Memorial Truck Show. There's probably 100-odd rigs here, quite a few people, and my guest, Mr. James Year, who's a master's student at Syracuse University. Is that correct, James?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. And James is engaged in a photojournalism project where he's taking photos of workers affected by the coming wave of autonomy and autonomous technology. And we met a couple of weeks ago. I was suggested to talk to James by Professor Steve Viscelli, whose book, The Big Rig, Trucking and the Decline of the American Dream, you all should go out and read right now. Go get it on Amazon or wherever. Preferably not Amazon, but anyhow. So James has very kindly come to this truck show to meet me and a few other people, and he's so kindly given us 40 minutes of his time to do an interview. So James, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm originally from a small farm up in northwest Iowa. Straight out of high school, joined the military. I hauled freight internationally in the United States Air Force on C-130s for about 6 years. Got out, got a degree in sociology. Bounced around a little bit. Now I'm at Syracuse in their multimedia photography and design master's program, and I'm working on a master's project on the projected impacts of self-driving technologies on the trucking industry, and basically what that means for drivers and what that means for everyone else. So, in a nutshell, that's who I am.
Okay, and you've come to the truck show where most of the people here would basically reject all of that stuff. And are skeptical of what this technology can do. And as I understand it, as part of your project, you've spent some time with autonomous truck manufacturers, the people that write the code and software for it. Is that correct?
I haven't gotten to that part of it yet. Like, so far I've been documenting the job, the culture, life on the road, basically what that means. So I'm kind of going in stages right now. I've been up close to a couple self-driving trucks down I-45 down in Texas, but as far as direct contact with manufacturing plants and stuff, that's I haven't crossed that bridge yet, but I'm trying to get there.
Right, so you're gonna go and see guys like Waymo and Torque and whatnot?
Yeah, so I was out in San Francisco and got to photograph a lot of the self-driving tech that's out there for personal transportation down in San Francisco. There's Waymo, Zoox, and there's a half dozen other self-driving companies that are out there currently doing testing. So I got to get a lot of photographs of that and see it firsthand. But yeah, like later on down the road, I'd definitely love to reach out to Waymo or Kodiak or any of the other autonomous carriers and try to document that side of things. But again, that's a more difficult conversation to have due to intellectual property stuff, and I need to get a publication behind me to get that level of access. So it's that's definitely on the horizon. I'm not there yet, though.
Right, and so you said you went and saw autonomous cars in San Francisco. What was your opinion of the technology as you saw it?
I talked to one of the drivers, or one of the former drivers of that. Apparently, the autonomous cars are doing like most of the heavy lifting as far as driving in confined urban areas right now. There are some fallbacks with the tech that are mainly weather related, but for the most part, it sounds like those cars are getting pretty close to being where they need to be. San Francisco is like the initial testing ground of it, but down in Phoenix, Arizona, Waymo currently has a fully automated driverless fleet of personal vehicles that's already hauling passengers. So the technology is getting very close.
Right, so you intoned about their weather restrictions. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm from Canada. I did 4 seasons on the ice, spent a lot of time in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, northern Alberta, where it snows and it's really cold, and the conditions are such that if you're not paying attention, you can find yourself in a whole lot of trouble real quick. So will Uber be launching autonomous taxis in Iqaluit anytime soon?
Probably not for the foreseeable future. It kind of comes down to the LiDAR systems that they use, because at the specific wavelengths, I don't want to get too technical with it, but from my understanding, the wavelengths of like the laser radar get blinded very easily by any amount of precipitation. So like at least out in San Francisco right now, anytime there's like fog or any sort of rain, it basically blinds the system. They have to go back to manual driving if there's any amount of precipitation out there. So as far as like northern Canada and the northern United States, it's not going to impact us as fast as it is going to be down in the Sun Belt, down California, Texas, around the whole I-10 corridor and all that.
Right. So with the limitations of this LiDAR, I'm curious to know, so most professional drivers, and I would count myself amongst them, I don't maybe not professional is not the right word, but we adjust and drive slow and take account of the weather. What is it about this technology that they can't do that? Like, is there any reason why they can't just like slow down and drive cautiously like humans do? Like, is the LiDAR totally effed up by the weather?
So it's not just the LiDAR, they also have radar and optical cameras. So basically with all the machine learning software, like all those things have to work in concert, right? At the end of the day, it's still a machine and it's not going to be perfect for a while. But ultimately, this technology is going to be able to cut operating costs by 30% across the board. And that means that there's probably about $200 billion worth of money that's sitting on the table in savings alone. So it's going to be one of those things where it might not be good now, but that dynamic can completely change in the next 3 to 5 years as the machines get better at learning this stuff.
Right. Yeah, and 30% is 30%, whichever way you cut it. Obviously, there are those who would point to the Luddites and the smashing of looms and, the effects of the, for lack of a better word, the capitalist free market system seeking efficiencies and trying to save money so as to deliver cheaper products and services to people. That said, truckers are part of that bottom tier of the pyramid of workers who make up and support everybody at the top. And if you go and essentially cast 3.5 million people in the United States out of work, if they were to basically have an autonomous vehicle replace every active truck driver right now, what do you do with them?
That's a $1 million question. So like the most severe aspect of this entire issue is that it's not just trucking. So like AI and robotics technologies are general purpose technologies. So it's like kind of like the equivalent of this era or the internet or electricity or the steam engine, right? So There's a study that came out of Oxford University in 2013 that stated that upwards of 47% of all currently existing jobs at that time in 2013 could be gone by 2050. So it's not just trucking jobs that we're talking about. It's everything from CEOs and boardrooms all the way down to people that are making pizzas. It's going to affect everyone and be implemented all at the same time in every market. So that's kind of the biggest danger that we have right now. So like say if there's a trucker that loses his job, there's no guarantee that I'll be able to get one at Uber or even after he gets a degree in accounting or something like that. So
right. So yeah, pardon the interruption. So something just struck me. I have read elsewhere that the artificial intelligence is actually going to take more white-collar jobs. So if you're an accountant or a researcher or a lawyer or someone who has to go through reams and reams and reams of paperwork all the time, that will actually be more easily automated than people working in the material economy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what a lot of the research is saying right now. As far as like which jobs are going to hit the hardest, it's kind of hard to identify which jobs specifically because it hasn't happened yet. But basically AI and robotics is the thing that makes this era of innovation different is that it's targeting routine cognitive processes that have never been targeted by automation before. So like accounting, CFOs, up in boardrooms, that's never quite happened before. And then there's all the other stuff like driving a truck.
Right. So this brings a very glaring question that's staring all of us in the face if you're paying attention, is the fact this isn't just unique to one particular class of people, which begs the question, will there be some kind of like cross-class consciousness develop in your mind to be more concerned about what we do with all the other people? The questions around UBI, what we do with ourselves, like the meaning as human beings we attach to our work, with automation taking all of these jobs, like what are we all going to do? And it's not just like a blue collar versus white collar thing, right? Like what are the problems as you foresee in the class dimensions of this?
So that's another $1 million question that I don't know if I have a good answer for. But I think like the biggest consideration is that the way that we currently are doing politics and trying to solve problems on a national scale, I think it's not going to be effective in tackling this issue. So I think like the best thing that drivers and everyone else can do right now is just to get educated on what this technology means, what's happened in the past, and start conversations about like what potential solutions might be. Because like in regards to trucking, the first companies that are going to be implementing this are going to benefit the most, far and away, and they're going to want to try to implement this stuff as fast as possible and get it implemented to the point where we can't live without it. And if it gets to that point, we lose a lot of agency to direct this change in a way that would be more beneficial to work for everybody.
You just used the phrase "we can't live without it." That somewhat makes me think that this is like a rent-seeking program where, once this technology is lodged in the firmament and then now we can't live without it, like as you say, the people first to it are going to reap great benefits. And, the next Jeff Bezos is just around the corner. And, what did Jeff Bezos do with his money? He bought the Washington Post, which is to say, now I'm the richest guy in the world and I want to influence things. So if the automation pimps get that wealthy as well, then they're going to, use their power and influence to get us to acquiesce to all this. Where do you think that leaves us?
So could you rephrase that question a little bit? There's a lot to unpack there. So I just want to make sure I get it.
Well, I guess the question boiled down is it becomes like a corporatism rent-seeking thing, right? Like at some point, the question has to be asked, like the people who are the first out of the gate with this autonomous technology that make it such that we can't live without it, Well, what if some of us do want to live without it and want to reject it and are happy doing what we're doing, right? Like, does the state have a role to say, well, that's great, your technology is awesome, but if people don't want to use it, they shouldn't have to?
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody should be forced to implement this technology and everything, but like it kind of comes down to the cost savings that the biggest companies that are going to implement this first are going to be able to cut their operational costs by 30% across the board. So like anybody that doesn't, want to participate in autonomous trucking, like no one's going to force you to. But on the flip side of that is that with the tech and liability and infrastructure hurdles that any company would have to overcome to be able to benefit from that technology, chances are they're going to be priced out of it. And then with all the intellectual property stuff on top of that, most of this tech is going to be monopolized from day one, sort of a thing. So there's going to be very few players that are going to be able to benefit from it on the industrial scale. And like, I don't know, I guess long story short, like you can opt out of it and just refuse to participate, but the competitors that are going to be doing it are going to be cutting those rates, and that's kind of a bad situation for anybody that's not playing the game.
Sure, I see that. I'm also, given my position in the trucking business and having been in it a long time, and by the advertising that the autonomous truck manufacturers are putting out themselves, that at the beginning of it, they're only going to be doing the pin-to-pin stuff, city to city on an interstate in the southern part of the U.S., and only that what they call the middle mile.
Right.
So they're still going to need people for first mile and last mile. There's all sorts of basic questions that any truck driver that's been around long enough is going to ask, like who's chaining up their axles if they go over Donner Pass or up the Coke in BC or something like this. Because I've spent most of my life doing what they call occupational trucking or industry-specific stuff, like I hauled tankers in northern Alberta. There's a pump on the tractor. I fill up everyone's tanks. Like, the robot's not going to get out of the cab and do all that. One of my associates was just here with a logging truck. Who's going to climb up in the loader and be able to identify what species of log and length and all this? Like, are they going to, how long is it until they have the cameras and remote control technology necessary that they actually take over all of that occupational trucking? Do you have any sense of that?
So like right now, basically the industry is trying to get level 4 autonomous trucking up to speed, where basically it's just like the middle mile on-ramp to off-ramp operations on long stretches of interstate. And so that's where they're at right now. Like the holy grail for that industry is going to be level 5 trucking, and that's completely dock to dock. Basically, you just program a beginning and end point. The truck does literally everything from from that point on. That's still a ways off yet. Driving a truck down the road is a very complex thing for a machine to try to learn. But that's definitely the end goal, is being able to take the driver out of everything. Because again, it comes down to cost savings. They can save 30% of total operating costs, and that's where the money comes in. But yeah, it's probably going to be a while before they get to true level 5. But there looks like there's one company, I think it was Plus AI, is putting some R&D into remote piloting, which I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, but I would imagine that would be applicable for like truck yard jobs at, say, like Amazon warehouses and that sort of thing. And then there's also a ton of other companies that are doing LTL or specializing in LTL, personal delivery, and personal transportation too. So it's I don't know, it's really kind of a complex and difficult thing to say, but it's they're all working on that.
Right. So now that you've described that for us, just for listeners and readers of my Substack who are not familiar with the gradations of autonomous vehicles, you mentioned level 4 and level 5. Can you describe each level and why it is they've skipped from level 1 past 2 and 3 straight to level 4? Because that's a big deal. I've read up a little on that myself, but can you describe that whole categorization for people who don't know?
As far as giving like a textbook academic definition, I'm probably not the right person to ask without seeing it like right in front of me. But level 4 is basically when they get to the point where they can start talking about removing the driver. And as we all know, like the driver accounts for about a third roughly, of total expenses. So that's kind of the main crux of the argument, because that's $200 billion a year that they talking about potentially saving. But as far as level 4, there's still limited driver input that would be required for like the first and last mile operations and stuff. But level 4, they can do the interstate stuff just fine apparently now, or they're getting to that point.
Right. So my own experience with autonomous vehicles as such, I worked in Australia for a while, and in Australian iron mining, in the remote western outback of Australia, there's a place called the Pilbara region, and within the Pilbara, there's a place called the Hammersley Ranges, which is where basically all of Australia's iron ore comes from. There's several rail lines that run out of the Hammersley Ranges to points along the coast where they transload the iron ore onto boats for export shipping to China, South Korea, Japan, Asian markets. The trains on those lines are now mostly fly-by-wire. BHP and Rio Tinto have offices in Perth, and they have all these staff working there, basically, running the trains via satellite. Now, trains are pretty easy. They're stuck on the track. It's Western Australia. There's nobody around. I mean, they might run over some kangaroos or cows, but generally speaking, their interaction with humans is pretty well nil. So the question a lot of people have that are skeptical of autonomous technology is that the technology works best in controlled situations, much like these rail lines in Australia. And what assurances does the public have that this technology is going to work on the road or in a downtown area, in a suburb, somewhere where there's people on bicycles? There's all kinds of random people that, anyone who's spent any time on the road knows most people that drive cars, not most, but some people that drive cars are not very good at it. And lots of random uncontrolled shit happens. So the question becomes, this technology, which has proven itself only in controlled situations, now has to be applied to a situation where you don't have total control of everything else. What do you know, or what do you think of the progression such that there might be any to being able to work in a non-controlled environment?
So like in an urban setting, so like having like Class A semis operating like in urban downtown areas and stuff, like that's not going to be for a while yet. That's like a level 5 automation discussion. We're only at level 4. So as far as the hold on, let me gather my thoughts a little bit. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I got a little bit of brain fog stuff going on right now.
Okay, so the question is, the technology for autonomous vehicles as such has mostly been proven successful in controlled environments. Again, as I referenced previously, Western Australia, trains, you're stuck on the track, you don't have to turn, you don't have to do anything, there's no people around. You go into a suburb of some major city like Dallas or New York or wherever, and now there's all kinds of traffic around, people on bikes, pedestrians, animals, who knows what.
Right.
The technology as it stands now, many people are skeptical that it can handle that stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so yeah, they're definitely right to be skeptical, and it seems like the technology now isn't there yet, because ultimately that's a level 5 thing. We're only at level 4, right? But so one of the things that the industry is harping on is safety. That ultimately this technology will make trucks safer, faster, more efficient, greener. Like the list goes on and on for all the perceived benefits, right? But regarding the safety thing, safe doesn't mean perfect, right? If I was to bet money on it, like when these trucks get to the point where they're like 10% safer than a human driver, it kind of creates a moral question on if you can save 10% of roadside accidents involving trucks. Don't we have a moral imperative to do that, right? And if we consider that even more, later on down the road when insurance starts recalibrating their rates a little bit and then giving cheaper rates to autonomous as a result of that. Like, it just kind of creates.
Might I offer a little bit of a skeptical, antagonistic take on that using an example from right now? I said, may I offer a skeptical and antagonistic take on that?
Absolutely.
So, I recently put out a post on my Substack called "The High Cost of Cheap Safetyism," and to your point, you just mentioned that once they reach some threshold of increased safety over human operation, and there's now a moral imperative. Well, there's been no moral imperative to do something about a particular phenomenon within trucking, which is their driver retention and churn issue, right? So there's been studies done that have shown, like, in excess of 40% of truck accidents today currently are caused by inexperienced drivers with not enough time on the road, and the lack of training they get, the deficiency of training they get. So that moral hazard might make the government say, well, maybe we should stop giving money to truck driving schools until they clean up their act, or maybe we should tell trucking companies they need to pay the old guys that know what they're doing more because they get in accidents less, but the government won't do that. So, a guy like me has to ask, why would insurance companies and the government all of a sudden decide, oh, we have this technology now that makes things better, when there are policy items and systemic items that they could change to make the safety on roads better right now without the technology, but they don't do that?
I kind of think I don't know, like, this is all like theoretical at this point, but I would say, like, the developers want this and they're going to be pushing it, and it's some of the biggest companies out there that are, demanding that this technology is going to be implemented. So I think if it kind of comes down to, like, Amazon and Alphabet, with, their Waymo investments and all that kind of stuff, like, they're the ones with the money to dictate the change. And I think, if I was going to place bets on who's going to win that argument, it's probably going to be them.
Right. So tech bros Uber Alice.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, motorcycles off in the distance. We've gone from 18 wheels to 2. Right. So tell us a little bit more about your photojournalism project. We'll get off the serious business and get to, like, the good stuff.
So far I've done about 15,000 miles on the road, and then hit up about 20 states, pretty much, all over the United States.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, gone all over the United States. Basically, I mentioned this before, I'm just kind of working in stages right now, so, like, I'm, kind of focusing on, like, the history, the pride, the job that's being done, and kind of creating, like, an homage or, like, an ode to trucking in a way. And I've started, like, the next phase is going to be starting to focus on different organizations, like, say, the Teamsters, starting to focus on more of the technological aspect of it. At some point I need to get back down to I-45 down in Texas and start photographing these trucks on the road. And then, just kind of networking and trying to get as many different aspects of the issue that I possibly can. And, trying to find some writers and stuff out there to write articles for the newspaper that I'm building, and hopefully crowdsource the whole thing and leave it around the truck stops for Driver Street.
Right. So you say you're building a newspaper, like an actual physical printed newspaper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm still, like, in the design concepts of that. I've got right now 50,000 images to go through, and that number is just going to keep growing for right now. But it'll be a digital imprint, or a digital, or in-person, like, physical newspaper with an online component, and then, like, a smaller, like, roadmap styled version of it as well for truckers to hand out to each other and stuff, and kind of spread the word.
Wow, that's very interesting. So my friend Long Haul Paul Marhofer, who is a contributor to Overdrive Magazine, singer, guitarist, is playing at this truck show we're at right now. He described the culture around these truck shows where guys have custom rigs, and a lot of them are older guys that don't want to accept the ELD, they don't want the Palantir and the Eye of Sauron in their trucks, and they just want to keep going as is. I think it sort of, what you're wanting to do with this newspaper runs parallel, because in physical reality, a lot of truck drivers still need to go to truck stops, get fuel, and the idea of using that old material
distribution idea of sending out newspapers to people and having something you can hang on and hold on to and read while you're in your bunk. That's really good, eh?
Yeah. Basically, the idea is that, like truckers, if they're on a 34-hour weekend reset, if they're sitting in there watching a movie, there's a newspaper there with some pertinent information about like where the industry is right now, where it's headed regarding autonomous, some of the issues that are inherent with that some of that we discuss, and also things that drivers can do to get involved, other organizations that are there to help. And then so basically it's not all doom and gloom. Like there's like the good thing about the situation that we're at right now is that there's still time, there's still plenty of time to like kind of direct how this change is going to happen, and we need to start talking about it now. So that's like ultimately the point of the project, is to help foster that discussion. Also, in like regards to other stuff that's been mentioned, I'm not making any policy recommendations with any of this. I know there was some talk about a UBI. I've got some major reservations about that. But hopefully with the discussion about that, or earned income tax credits or retraining programs and stuff, like through that discussion, hopefully we can find out a better solution so we don't have to do that specifically. It's basically trying to be nonpartisan about everything, and then just basically saying, hey, this is what it is, this is what's happened, this is what's been done in the past, and hopefully we can find a better way forward.
Right. That runs parallel to my project here with autonomoustruckdrivers.substack.com, where I'm interested in what Karen Levy calls the slope between now and fully autonomous trucks. My take on it is that, with the looming takeover of our jobs by robots, which I'm powerless to stop. You can stand athwart history yelling stop, and usually it doesn't, and there's not much you can do about that. However, between here and there, I would prefer that you don't treat drivers like robots. And the last 10, 20 years of excess regulations, ELDs, and now the truck manufacturers putting in all this, lane control stuff and automatic transmissions, and it's like, they don't understand the connection between driver and road, and they don't understand the human element involved. And the attachment, regardless of attachment or like however truck drivers think of themselves, like we still have to do a job, we still have to be away from home, we still have to put in all these long hours. And the reason most people getting into trucking is they have that personality that they don't want to be told what to do, they don't want to be imposed upon too much, either by technology or management, the government, whoever. Yet, all signs point towards that, like, ever increasing. And, like I say, a lot of the guys at this truck show, older trucks, they're working in that liminal space where they have a tractor that's built before 2000, so they don't have to have an ELD. They don't have the emission control equipment, which is really costly to operate and maintain and put DEF in. So, the question remains, like, what do we do, like, over and above your project, which is awesome, as far as, like, trying to get the people involved in this to stop trying to roboticize us before the robots take over? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
So basically, how to stop or prevent it outright?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we'll ever prevent it outright, but I think, like, the project you're running and my proclivities are sort of parallel, and I wonder, if there's any way we can, like, hitch your project to mine, where we can get lawmakers, technology people to sort of understand that, like, all this stuff that you think is awesome, the people actually using it might not agree and don't want to use it.
Right.
So, like, sell it to the people that want it and leave the rest of us the fuck alone. Like, how do we do that?
So yeah, that's probably one of those things where I don't have the authority to answer on it and everything, but it does, like, the question does kind of remind me of a book I read from Carl Benedict Fry. He's a professor of economics and wrote The Technology Trap, and basically the whole thing about that book was trying to think of the right words to say this. So basically, the main point of the book is that the Industrial Revolution could have happened 1,000 years earlier, but it didn't. And that was mainly because prior to the Industrial Revolution, rejecting new technologies was the norm, not the exception. So basically, running headlong into innovation, regardless of what the consequences would be, is a relatively new thing in the human experience, like if you're talking about that from a historical standard.
That's a great point.
Right. So I think everyone can agree in the last 20 years we've seen massive monumental changes with the internet. And I would argue that the internet fell far short of expectations because it was supposed to be this wonderful democratizing thing. And, half of it's porn now. And it's not exactly a great thing. The internet's a dumpster fire. And
also the other half of it is the control of information has been consolidated by a small group of companies who are all in bed with a certain type of government. Not all government, but a certain strain of thought that has taken over in the 21st century. And those people, despite their advertising and marketing, aren't actually interested in democratizing anything, right?
Well, yeah, I would argue like with the internet, it wasn't a very democratizing thing. Like it's kind of like with the metaverse now, where it's, hey, we've got this new thing, we're all going to start using it. And I think if you go around talking to people about like if they want to actually start using it, most people would say no. That's not a very democratizing process at all. Back to my initial point with the internet thing. Like, I think if we can go back 20 years and like with a crystal ball and show people like what life is like with the internet, I think we would have had a far different conversation about what that technology meant and where we're at now, and we would have handled that a lot differently, in my opinion. And we're kind of at the point now where we're seeing all this AI robotics thing coming down the road, and we kind of see the writing on the wall and what that's going to mean. So we need to start figuring this stuff out now, not 10 years from now.
Right. What's the old G.I. Joe thing? Knowing is half the battle, and having to know is talking about it. You have to talk about it in order to know. Right. And that discussion should not be one way in your mind, correct?
Right. No, I think, the rate of change with all this new tech is just going to keep happening faster and faster. Like even within the last couple of years, like AI has progressed to the point where like even design jobs, writing jobs are in the crosshairs right now, and that wasn't the case a couple of years ago. The faster it happens dictates that it's going to happen even faster. I don't really think America is in a good place right now to deal with that rapid amount of change because, even for my nephew, I have no idea what my nephew is going to do for a job. And that's a massive problem that we all have to deal with, that everyone's going to have to deal with.
Right. Luddites on speed.
Pretty much.
Never mind truckers on amphetamines. Let's give it to the people smashing the looms. What's that movie with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, Fight Club, where they blow up all the credit card data centers at the end? That's me with ELDs. What do you think?
I don't know. You probably got an argument. I wouldn't advocate for any amount of violence with ELDs, but I don't know. Like it definitely created about as many problems as it tried to fix, in my opinion. But
right. All right. Well, cool. I think we had a nice discussion here, and people got to know what your project is, and I really appreciate your time. Is there anywhere people can find you online, sir?
I've got a little bit of the work up on Instagram. That'd probably be the best way to reach out. It's at YearJames, YearJames. Right.
Anywhere else besides Instagram?
I've got a website, jamesyear.com.
Right. Okay, cool. So I'm going to post all that stuff to my Substack. This is my first official interview, hopefully also transcribed. Thanks everybody for listening and or reading. I'll try and nick a few photos from James and put that in with the article. And until next time, this is Voice of Gord, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Thanks a bunch.